It's a big talking point in wrestling right now. I think should ring ropes be permanently replaced with barbed wire? I've looked at this in great detail. I've looked at all the benefits, and I understand the arguments for the yes side. But overall, I think it's a really bad idea for a whole wide range of reasons. So in this video, I'm just going to explain why I think permanently replacing wrestling ropes with barbed wire is a bad idea. One, it might hurt the wrestlers. So obviously, if you're wrestling in a wrestling ring and you're used to throwing your opponents into the ropes and being thrown into the ropes, if you replace those with barbed wire, all of a sudden it's a lot more painful. You cut yourself open, you get all sorts of injuries. Wrestlers will be missing, they'll be out of action, and that's the first reason for not following through with this. Number two, the ropes keep falling down. This happens quite a lot if you ever watch any barbed wire massacres or those types of matches. Usually when wrestlers get thrown into the ropes just fall down. So this leaves us with a dilemma where the ref will either have to spend 5 to 10 minutes fixing the ropes along with the ring crew, or they just ignore it and then we continue the match without any ropes, rendering the barbed wire pointless to begin with. So not a good dilemma, not good options, and that's the second reason for not going through with this, in my opinion. 3, fans can't identify which show is which. This is obviously a very important one. So if you watch Raw, how do you identify by looking at this that it's Monday Night Raw you're watching? Obviously, the red ropes. It's red for Raw, blue for SmackDown, yellow for NXT. Now, some people might notice the big Raw sign. Obviously that's quite noticeable, but some people might miss it. So for those people, the ropes are very important. 4, the ref might get sweaty hands. So obviously, if the barbed wire replaces the ropes, that means as a safety precaution, referees now have to wear gloves if they wish. And the problem with that is that over time, during the match, their hands will get sweatier and sweatier, and then it might get to the point where they're counting a pinfall. So it might go 1, 2, and then the ref is like, actually, my hands are really sweaty right now. And that obviously wouldn't happen if he wasn't wearing gloves, if it was just regular ropes. So something worth thinking about. 5, it won't help if wrestlers get hungry. So obviously some matches that we see in wrestling are quite long, half an hour, an hour. Recently there was even a 2-hour Iron Man match. So it wouldn't be uncommon for wrestlers to get hungry during their matches. And if one of them decides to eat the barbed wire, that's a huge health risk. Not only for their own health is that an issue, but also they might end up suing the promotion because of complications they receive as a result of eating the barbed wire. And that could put companies out of business, so a very obvious downside to that one. Rope enthusiasts might stop attending. So when you look at a massive group of people that attend a wrestling show, it's safe to say that most of them are there for the wrestling, but you can't assume that there are no rope enthusiasts there. If you go to a wrestling show, there's 3 ropes there that you're looking at the whole night, 3-4 hours staring at these ropes, bouncing and springing away. They come in all different colours, as I've mentioned just there. Raw has red, NXT has yellow. In fact, when 205 Live used to be on Raw, it'd go from red to purple to red again, which, if you're into ropes, must have been some crack, you know what I mean? So you're removing the fun element for them. It's bad for business, they'll stop attending, and it's another reason why the ropes shouldn't be replaced with barbed wire. Number 7, it might give World War I veterans flashbacks. So obviously, if any World War I veterans decide to attend a WWE event, for example, and they expect to see normal ring ropes and they end up seeing barbed wire, it might take them back to the trenches and they might get all sorts of PTSD where they would have seen barbed wire, in their past. And nobody wants to be sitting next to somebody while they have a big sort of, traumatic flashback like that. So it'd kind of ruin the live experience for some fans. Number 8, it might cause the commentators to make a mistake. So obviously, when you're commentating a show, words that are easy to say off the top of your head can be quite a help. So rope, 4 letters, ropes, 5 letters. It's one word, it's easy to pronounce. The commentators aren't going to get it wrong. They'll say, wow, he's been thrown into the ropes and things like that. Whereas if you replace that with barbed wire, obviously, it's 2 words now instead of 1. More letters, more syllables. It's very easy for commentators to make a mistake, so there's a very good chance that they end up saying Schmarb Schmeier by accident, and then all the fans that sit near them will start laughing at them and throwing beans at them and stuff. So you don't want to see that, because it's perfectly okay for commentators to make a mistake. Second that bell rang, Pac just... And it's not nice to see commentators get bullied then for making a mistake like that. So something we need to think about if we are going to replace the ropes with barbed wire, and it's one of the reasons why I'm dead against it. The ring announcer might prick their hand. This is obviously a very important one too. Ring announcers like to wear suits. They don't really want to wear gloves because that might ruin their aesthetic. So they might come into the ring, put their hands on what they think is the rope because they're not paying attention, and then before they realise it, oh no, they've pricked their hand on the barbed wire, and now there's blood everywhere. They try to announce somebody's, introduction, and they say weighing in at and they can't see because there's blood all over their notes. They can't see the writing, and it kind of ruins. It kind of ruins what they're going for. It kind of ruins the show from a production standpoint. 10 is another really obvious one. It might influence the kids. Kids are very impressionable, and they watch wrestling and then they try and replicate it at home on trampolines or whatever it is. Currently, there's very little barbed wire in wrestling, but if barbed wire are the ropes, then kids will associate barbed wire with wrestling, and when they see barbed wire in a non-wrestling situation, such as, the shop or whatever, they might just grab it and try choke out their dad with it for a laugh, which obviously isn't a laugh, and it's another reason why you shouldn't replace the ropes with barbed wire. 11, wrestlers might mess with it during intermission. So it's a known fact that wrestlers are incredibly immature. I actually don't know if everyone's aware of this, but during intermission, when they're not looking, wrestlers oftentimes unhook the ring ropes and start whipping each other with it, like it's a towel in the change room, hey, whipping each other with it, thinking that it's really funny to whip each other with the ring rope. Obviously, if the ring rope is replaced with barbed wire, it gets very bloody very fast, it gets very serious, and people get hurt. That's not something I think the wrestlers will be smart enough to take into account, but it's something we need to take into account, so that's why ropes need to stay. Number 12, fans might think it's Wrestling Society X and then get disappointed, so obviously, when you think of barbed wire, you think of Wrestling Society X. A lot of fans will come in, they'll see the barbed wire, and they might think, particularly on the first show, oh shit, it's an impromptu Wrestling Society X reunion. And they might get really excited, only to find out that it's not a Wrestling Society X reunion when they see that it's not the best wrestling show they've ever seen. Then they'll end up being quite disappointed. They might even leave the building. So, another thing worth taking into account, luchadores can't do top rope dives. So if you go to a WWE event and you see Grand Metalik, you're like, oh, I can't wait to see him do a top rope dive, and he jumps up on the top rope. He's not going to dive onto his opponent, he'll probably just fall straight on the ground because the rope will probably collapse underneath him because it isn't the rope anymore, it's barbed wire playing the role of a rope, which is quite dangerous, as I've already outlined several times. 14, some wrestlers might be too scared to wrestle. So as we know, wrestlers are all very big and strong, but sometimes they might be scared of barbed wire and they might not want to admit it, or they might be scared of blood. So somebody like Bobby Lashley might have a mad phobia of blood, but he's too embarrassed to say it to anybody, so he'll get booked and he'll be ready to wrestle, but then all of a sudden he'll come up with excuses. He might say I twisted my ankle, I can't go to the ring, my arm hurts, or I'm hungry, I can't go to the ring, I have to eat a sandwich, or I'm tired, I'm tired, I'm about to fall asleep, I can't wrestle right now, I'm tired. Are you dumb? And he might get aggressive with people, it might cause fights backstage, and most of all, it'll leave the fans very disappointed because they all want to see Bobby Lashley wrestle, but he might not wrestle in barbed wire circumstances. 15, barbed wire massacre is undermined, so if one wrestler challenges another to barbed wire massacre to cap off a big blood feud, nowadays you'd go, wow, barbed wire massacre, that's heavy shit, they're gonna cut each other open. But if you just saw Humberto Carrillo and Drew Gulak do that on Main Event earlier that day, it kind of undermines it, and a barbed wire massacre just becomes a normal match. Number 16, Saturday Morning Slam won't return. Obviously, one of the things that most wrestling fans are holding out for right now is that Saturday Morning Slam will return on Saturday morning soon enough. But due to the very sort of PG or G nature of the show, I don't think it will allow for barbed wire, and it decreases the chance of Saturday Morning Slam returning, which upsets a lot of wrestling fans. 17, it might ruin entrances, so different wrestlers have different styles when it comes to making entrances. Those wrestlers who run to the ring, they're the ones whose entrances are going to be ruined because they'll probably sprint up to the ring but then stop or slow down just to be careful that they don't cut themselves before they get into the ring. And it might kind of ruin the momentum, ruin the hype, and it might be a bit of a buzzkill. 18, it might scare the kids. I know what you're thinking, there's no reason for kids to be scared of barbed wire, they've never been tangled in barbed wire, but you have to remember, kids are pretty dumb, they're pretty stupid, they're pretty annoying, they're kind of a waste of space, and some of them probably do have fears of barbed wire, and obviously, if a lot of kids watch wrestling and they're scared of barbed wire, they might stop watching wrestling, and that'd be bad for business. So, something worth looking out for. It might scare the adults. Some adults might have a phobia of barbed wire. So they might see the barbed wire and go, that's barbed wire. And then that might, deafen the people around them and kind of stop the people around them from enjoying the show. It might put a lot of fans off going to events. 20, they might accidentally use exploding barbed wire by accident. We see this happen all the time in Japan, for example. It's supposed to be a regular barbed wire match, but they end up exploding by accident and people get hurt. And nobody wants to see that, but the reality is there's only so much normal barbed wire to go around that it's only inevitable that at some point they're going to accidentally use the exploding barbed wire and wrestlers will be getting blown up without their permission. 21, it might result in a global barbed wire shortage. This is obviously a big issue for anyone who uses barbed wire outside of wrestling for practical purposes such as scratching your back or whatever it is that they do with barbed wire. But if it's constantly being used for wrestling and wrestlers are being thrown through it and it's breaking and it's tearing and whatever else, there's going to be more and more and more barbed wire being spent on WWE and wrestling in general so that other people won't be able to use it. Tucker might protest. So obviously if wrestlers' health and safety is being put in jeopardy and there's loads of disadvantages as I've outlined, another disadvantage might be that wrestlers such as Tucker might protest. I don't want Tucker to protest because I want to see Tucker wrestle. So this is another reason for people to not replace the ropes with barbed wire just in case a good wrestler decides to protest. One of the wrestlers might be allergic to barbed wire, so obviously if barbed wire surrounds the ring at all times, if one of the wrestlers is allergic and they start coughing and sneezing, that's not ideal during a pandemic and it is a possibility. It's something we need to be aware of. Hot tags become quite slow. So obviously if you ever watch tag team wrestling, one of the best parts is the hot tag. A wrestler gets tagged in, they jump through the ropes, they start taking out everyone. But the reality is, once somebody makes a tag, they have to be very careful getting into the ring that they don't get tangled or they don't hurt themselves. So they'll have to just sort of slowly climb through, and then by the time they've climbed through, their opponent might have recovered and it might no longer be a hot tag but rather a regular lukewarm tag, which isn't really as exciting. First blood matches would end very fast, so obviously if you're looking forward to a first blood match, once the bell rings, you know, ding ding ding, Irish whip, it's over. So that's it kind of ruins the first blood match. People might laugh at Dominick Mysterio. This is obviously a very serious one as well because Dominick Mysterio is trying to follow into the footsteps of Rey Mysterio. He does the 619 and the 619 is a very cool move. If he had to do it in barbed wire, you know, he'd probably just fall out of the ring and everybody would laugh at him and he'll probably get really upset and start crying even though it's not his fault, but the 619 would be really bad. And I hope you agree with all this. Yeah,